What's up guys, welcome back to Pop Beat Breakdowns. Today I'm going to be breaking down a beat in the style of Lola Young's hit song Messy, which is currently doing very well in the charts at the time of recording this video. Now if you're someone who's a beginner to music production or even someone who's wanting to refine their craft a little bit more, hopefully this beat breakdown will give you the best insight about how to build up a beat in this style, especially breaking down instrument by instrument in what order it was added, so you can get the best understanding of how to build a beat like this for yourself. And we're also going to deep dive into the instruments used as well. A lot of these are Logic as well, so make sure you stick around to the end because there's a lot of instruments and sounds and presets in this which you can apply to your own productions to make something a similar sound. If you are new to this channel, make sure you smash the subscribe button as it's the best way to support the channel. But with that out of the way, this is the production in front of us. Let's just have a quick listen to the beat that we're going to be breaking down today. Now, on this channel a lot, I do say about the whole 4-chord song. This is actually even more simple than that. This is actually a 2-chord song. So if you're someone who doesn't have much music theory knowledge, don't worry. This is actually a very easy production to start making. The chords are D and E for the chord progression. So that's the chords for it. It's a 1-10 tempo, trying to match as close to the original as possible. Now, we're going to try and talk about how we start this production because it's a very sort of like unique, almost like a pop rock kind of production, but almost like with, I'd say, some very indie aspects to it. So what I did first was I wanted to try and set the precedent for the rhythm. So I actually found this acoustic guitar sample in Splice. You can bypass this point as well. This is just how I started it. You don't have to start with this, but this was the acoustic guitar I found. I just felt this was a really good place where I could then build the drums around. So this is where obviously I start programming in MIDI. All the drums, of course, always have it bust into the same track because then it gives you a lot more ease of mixing. So I started, when it came to building the drums, was obviously I had this on the whole time and I just layered in a simple kick and snare. For those who want to know, the kit that I was using today was Native Instrument and it was the Abbey Road 80s drummer and just the pop preset. Didn't really do much with the actual processing itself. On the output track, I do have these boosts here in the low end and the mid to highs to give it that crisp, but also very like low heavy feel, so the drums feel very mid heady and boxy, almost like it's more like a live recording because this is what this really has an essence of. So next I added in the hi-hats, which very simple, and I had that pan slightly to the left just so the hi-hats are in the middle of the mix because I find when hi-hats are in the middle of the mix they could be a little bit of an ear saw, I want to say it, and they don't really sit in the middle of the mix very well sometimes, so I just had it at the side to create a little bit of space. Then I added in some crashes, and that's the ride there. Just adds a little bit more flavour in the high end of the drums and to get a little bit more depth to the percussion section. And then lastly, we got some tom fills here throughout. Again, same drum kit. And then in here. And even threw in this little tom fill just in the middle here when it didn't really need it. This is just something extra to give like the drums a little bit of development between the bars. Didn't have to put it in there, but I did. So at this point now, we basically are just built around the rhythm section, and the next thing to add is acoustic guitars because the original Lola Young song has acoustic guitars in it. But the thing I really like about the acoustic guitar when mixing with drums is they're both very rhythmic and almost very percussive instruments. I always say on this channel, acoustic guitar is a very percussive instrument. So that's why it's very good to, after the drums, acoustic guitar was a good one to make sense to do next. Now for the acoustic guitar today, we are using the Strummed Acoustic 2 Session Guitarist by Native Instruments. I use this a lot. You would have seen this a lot in my previous videos if you're somebody who watches this channel a lot. And we start with the handmade preset. So I just program the chords in for D and E here, and then the preset does the rest. Then I layered that in with some power chords. So you can hear that there. And then a singular note as well to put more emphasis on the root note of each chord. So there it is. So when you blend it with obviously the muted acoustic guitar, or dead notes rather, and then with the drums, you've got the basis of the rhythm section. It's got a real nice bounce to it. And the acoustic guitar, don't underestimate how much that's actually adding to it. So the next thing to do then is add the bass line. So for the bass today, I'm using probably one of my favorite bass VSTs to use, and that is the Rickenbacker bass by Native Instruments. I love this. I use this in 90% of my productions that need actual bass guitar. It all sounds very real. It's got real nice programming to create some like very nice natural slides when you're transitioning between notes. So I highly recommend if you're ever looking for a bass VST, the Rickenbacker bass is fantastic for that. And I just recorded this simple bass line. Now the bass line in the Lola Young song, it's got a little bit of energy to it, so I wanted to try and add that in. So this is the bass line I kind of came up as a result of that. And that's just playing around with the first and the third of the chords. So if you play a triad on your keyboard of a D major chord, just use them 3 notes when you're playing in your bass line. And when you go up to an E, of course, do the same. And then this is how you can just use them 3 notes just to create your bass line. And that's what you need to do. You don't need to overcomplicate the bass line. So when you add the bass line, all of a sudden, the rhythm section is definitely now complete. So now we need to really start paying attention to the finer details. So if we want to make the production sound similar, so I use the double-tracked whirly. So this is the preset in Logic here. You can find it in the keyboard section. And this sounded very similar to a keyboard that I heard in the background of the original song. Not exactly, but I do like to try and be a little bit original with these sorts of things. So this is what it sounded like. And this is just playing a first and a fifth of each chord when I do this. Because I sometimes think that I want this to be very subtle in the background, just as an extra texture. And if you play the whole triad, sometimes the third can be a little bit more of a clashy note and make it too sort of like muddy and too filled. And I just want this to be a really nice, like subtle addition to the production. So when you mix that in with everything so far, then you can just hear it in the background. This is nothing that's meant to be at the front of the mix. This is something that's just sitting in there, just like this. You can hear it, but it's not obviously taken over the mix. Now we get onto electric guitars. So I've recorded all these electric guitars in myself. I used my Strat, which is just above the phone that I'm recording this from. And all of the sounds, these are Logic presets, these amps. You'll be glad to know. So we had the Country Gent for the first 2 guitars. I'm going to play these all one by one because there's a couple of different electric guitar layers that I've used here to try and get the full effect that I want. So I started with this one. Just muted notes. And then for the second Country Gent, I just went a little bit more intense. Muted chords. Now for these two, because it's the same sound, I want to create a nice stereo spread. So what I've done is I've used a sample delay on both of them, but I've sample delayed one of them to the left, one of them to the right. This basically splits the signal into 2, so it acts as double tracking for the guitars already, but that sample delay means there's a slight bias in your left ear, which perceives it as 2 different signals, 2 different guitars. So this is actually make sure the guitar's nice and thick in the mix, but also at the sides, so it's not muddying up and congesting the middle of the mix. And I've done that as well for the other 2 guitars, but then for the next guitar we used the dubwise, and I wanted something a little bit more legato. So dubwise again in the clean guitar section of the presets. Now I really wanted muddy sounding guitars, almost like very low heavy, because in the production it does that as well, and it's almost got a real live feel to it, where in a live, if you've ever done a live recording before, it can be a little bit muddy at times, like because there's all sorts of room sounds been picked up. So I really wanted to try and make sure that was in there because it really helps to the flavor of the mix. And then lastly we got the deluxe blues, which I've added in here. A lot more rocky. I just throw that in because I thought that'd just be a fun addition to have. Now we're not actually done there with the guitars. I've laid 2 more guitars in, so I've recorded this in. It's the big tube, and this has got a really nice big reverb. This is Native Instruments ROM reverb. It's a 4.8 second reverb though, if you want to replicate yourself using a different reverb. And this was the first one. Just playing in some riffs. And I'll pan this one slightly to the left of the mix. And then the second one, I've panned to the right. This is a more up the octave guitar riff. And together, they just create this really nice harmony. I only really need to turn that feedback off as well. So as long as you're playing in the key, it's always going to harmonize really nicely. And when you put all these guitars together, you get this real nice thick wall of guitars. And again, I'm not going for clean here. I do not want clean sounding guitars. I want this to be a real nice sort of like, almost like a rock concert in like a, let's say like a medium to small gig venue sized feel. So when you put that all together so far, this is what the outcome is. Now there's just a couple more things we need to add to really tie this all together. The first thing is the beautiful melody. This is the preset in Logic, and this is very close to the arpeggiated synth which plays in Lola Young's song. And again, I'm just doing an arpeggio of D and then goes up to E, then the arpeggio goes up to there. And it's very simple, not much to say about it. But you can hear it, very 80s. But it's in the track, so I play it in. And then lastly, just two more things I've added. This is just personal preference, you don't have to add these. So I really wanted a little bit more of that Rhodes feel. And there is a fly, sorry, buzzing around me, it's really annoying. But I want to add the Mellotron flutes. This is one of my just go-to sounds, which I use in a lot of my productions, which kind of makes my own Beat Store sound a tiny little bit more unique to myself. So in the keyboards, Mellotron flutes section, that's a tongue twister. They've got chords. It's a very cool sound. And then lastly, we've just gone into Alchemy and we've added in a deep 808 bass. This basically just supplies sub. But one thing I've done is I have rolled off the attack, and you want to roll it off to about 20% because it gets rid of the click at the start. So when you hear the next note play here, you'll hear it's a little bit more just sub than the attack of the 808 before. And that's literally it. When you put it all together, this is the end result right here. Now, I'll quickly talk about mastering. I don't overcomplicate mastering when it comes to beats, but one thing I like to do, if you want the simplest form of mastering to get a good result and improve your mix, just use a channel EQ and the mastering assistant. These two together, if you're someone who doesn't know how to master, this is going to help you out a lot. So the first thing I always do is I do the mastering chain first, because this isn't going to get it exactly to how you want it to be. It will do it to how it thinks it's meant to be, which isn't always right. So I went for the punch. This gives it a little bit more grit. So obviously it did its own EQ here. And then once I've done the mastering, I drag it down one. And it's really important you make sure you have the channel EQ before the mastering in the chain. Because if you have it afterwards, then the limiter is not going to be in effect anymore. So your track will be clipping. So then you put the channel EQ in, and then you just little boosts here and there, maybe some cuts as well, just to really tailor it to how you want it to be. And trust me, doing it this way, it never fails for a simple master. It's always going to improve the mix rather than make it worse. So this is just a very simple way to master your music. So with that all said, guys, that is the track. If you enjoyed this video, and if you're someone who wants a new source of inspiration for music, by the way, as well, I highly recommend you, after this video now, go check out Samples by Joe Gautry in the link below. This is my sample pack store. All these samples here have been extracted from beats that I've made. They're released, ready to use in your productions, royalty-free. So if you're someone who's looking for a new source of inspiration for music, go and check that out. But yeah, guys, thanks so much for this video. Keep making music, and I'll see you in the next video.